If you've ever seen me try to open any brand new soap dispenser ever, you'll know that I understand struggle intimately. And a lot of people struggle with guitar chords when they're first starting out too, and there's a few simple fixes that you could do to kind of get rid of that struggle of trying to move around all those open chords and what sounds like and your fingers and blah blah blah. So, beginner lesson on how to really master a lot of these different guitar chords, okay? So the first thing you want to do is you want to focus on one finger at a time, okay? Maybe two of the most common chords you'll see is like a C major to a G major. Now there's a couple things I want to talk about here, all right? So I'm going to be jumping all over because it's a bunch of tips and tricks packed into one video. Look at this G first, all right? If you look at a book is going to tell you to play a G like this. Now, if you just focus on my fretting hand, what looks easier to do? Playing C to G like this? Or like this? Okay? Your ring finger leading the way on a G major chord is probably going to be more helpful at first. Because one of the hardest things to do when you're first starting out is thinking about moving different fingers at the same time to different places, right? That's why a lot of times you'll do that tried and true beginner technique where it's like you take your finger and you force it into a different spot. I love that one. I was doing that one a lot too. Get over, But that's because it's almost impossible to move all your fingers in the right way to the spot where you want it to go. But one finger at a time is actually really easy, okay? That's why this G major is going to be the secret sauce, okay? And I don't even want you to focus on your pointer finger right now. Just take your ring finger on the 3rd fret of the A string and your middle finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, okay? So eventually you'll get your pointer finger on that 1st fret, but really just take these two and then move them a string lower, okay? And don't worry about playing all 6 strings. It's not going to sound bad. In fact, the open strings help you out with the beginner chords, which is great. But focus on moving these two together from 3A and 2D to 3E and 2A, okay? We'll call this C major. We'll call this G major. If you really want to do that, just to get it going, right? In the old Mel Bay books, the way that he used to teach them, like that, that's fine. But trust me, in the long run, this is going to be easier because it doesn't matter what fingers you use to hold a note down. It just matters that you hold that note down, okay? So being able to focus on one finger at a time or a group of fingers that move together is a lot easier than trying to move them all in different locations and kind of hit that same spot. All right? Because I think at first we worry way too much about getting all the strings perfect and getting sound from all the strings when you really just want to get in the habit of making the right shape and then finding the right ways to kind of move around these different shapes, right? So C to G. And in fact, here's a way that we can use all of them together. One chord progression you're going to hear a lot is going to be C major to G major, A minor, E minor. Okay? So you'll see these are the full chord voicings of all of them. And even though if you look at my hand, it's not moving efficiently, but I think the point here is that if I just take one note that we hear, the root note of the chord, you might be surprised at how well you can get it to sound without having any of the other fretted notes to help it out. The root note has such an important role in how we hear a chord. That's what you want to focus on. So that's what you want your lead finger, or if it's an open string, with your picking hand, to really focus on. Okay, so C major, G major, A minor, E minor. The notes are going to be 3A, 3E, open A, open E. So real quick, here's an example of the full chord versus, let's say, all the other notes that I'm fretting, I'm actually not going to hit. I'm going to mute as if I were trying to get there and I couldn't get there all the way, okay? So, played clean, C, G, A minor, E minor. Played muted. Hear that? That's how that sounds when my fingers are on the note, but they're not able to get there in time and push it down all the way. Like, okay? Does that sound so bad? It doesn't sound that much different than getting the full chord voicings in there, right? So just, again, what I mean by, if I go through the chord one note at a time like that, there's that C, right? I just have that C, that 3rd fret on the E string, ringing out, and then the only thing else you can hear are actually the G string and the E string. C, G, E. That's the whole chord. My middle finger's trying to hit that 2nd fret on the D string, but it's maybe not getting tone. My pointer finger's trying to hit that 1st fret on the B string, but it's not getting tone. Guess what? It still sounds great as compared to... Okay, so there is a difference for sure, but as long as you hit that lead tone on time, you can mute the rest of the string and it's gonna sound pretty good. And that's the next tip that we're gonna get to after really the greatest tip of all, is just to put elixir strings on your guitar. They play so much easier, they play so much better. It's way easier for your hands to kind of get around if you use like these awesome nano web coated strings that I use in all my videos. Elixir sponsored this video. If you've never tried these strings out, definitely check them out, because there's nothing worse than having that squeaky sound when you like travel between chords. One of the best things about elixir coated strings is they're silent when you're trying to make that transition. You don't get that really terrible, hideous squeak of uncoated strings. And the coating actually makes them easier to hold down. In fact, if you are having a really hard time, maybe try changing the gauge of your strings. I use 12s, which I find that to be like a good medium compromise between like the best tone and the playability. If you want to do something lighter to hold down easier, maybe use like 11s or even 10s. And again, that's the thickness of the thinnest string. So it'll be easier to hold down, but maybe it won't be as full of a tone. I think 12s is like the sweet spot to hit them. But again, if you've never tried it, definitely check it out, because it's really going to help out using elixir strings, okay? So the next tip is to force yourself into maybe playing beyond your means, okay? Now what I mean by that is when people think about making chords and fretting chords with their fretting hand, they really don't see how their strumming hand affects everything, okay? Now, one of the other things that you might struggle with as a beginner is like making chord changes on time. Forget that, because you have good rhythm. You have better rhythm than you think, right? If you can count to 4 over and over again, 1, 2, 3, 4. I bet you can do that just hitting your knee in a somewhat steady rhythm, okay? So you have decent rhythm, you just have to translate that to downstrokes on a guitar, okay? Now, where you might struggle is you're waiting for your left hand to get to the spot before you engage the rhythm, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, go to that G. 1, 2, 3, 4, go to that A minor, then you'll speed it up because you got there quicker, right? So, practicing with a metronome is great, backing tracks is great, but really just focus on keeping your fret hand going. And then if you hit your root note on time, I bet you could probably already do this. 3A, 3E, open A, open E. And even if you kind of miss the strings a little bit and maybe hit a few of them like that, you're still doing it in time. And you'd be surprised at how much setting a deadline for your left hand to get to a location will actually force your body to just be like, all right, well, I guess they want my hand to be here, so I'm just gonna do it, right? And it's just the incredible thing about the human brain is that if you give yourself a deadline, it'll just eventually start to do the thing a little bit better, all right? So start off with just getting that root note, and then don't worry so much about the other fingers. Again, if we're doing 4 counts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Within that 4 count, I bet your fingers are going to be able to figure out how to get better tone into those chords, okay? So that's actually a really important one. Come up with some kind of method where you make yourself switch on time or close to on time, right? Nobody's ever gonna have perfect timing when they first start out, but it's just a really good thing to maybe think about. And another thing, that starting with a leading tone, a root note first, and kind of jumping off of there and trying to find the most efficient way to switch between those. Another thing to think about is having a death grip on that chord. I know beginners really, they go so hard on these chords, And that's why you'll get a lot of that buzzing, is because when you really got that death grip going on, you're probably going to have that spill over onto other strings and get buzziness, right? You probably don't have to hold these strings down as hard as you think you do when you first start out. That's why that great thing to do is get that root note. Again, see how, just do an experiment. Just try to hold one fret down and see how light you can put the pressure on while still getting a good clean tone. And again, you'll know when you're being too light is when it starts to maybe buzz, because then you're not pinching it down to the fret hard enough, but you're probably pinching it down too hard anyway, okay? So worry about one root note at a time, and then worry about the rest of the notes that come after that. I can't stress this hard enough, right? Root notes first, get that rest of the chord, essentially the other parts of the chord melody or harmony. Those will come in time. Worry about your root note being on the downbeat first. That's really gonna help you become a better player, right? So once you think about that death grip, there might be a couple different ways that are holding you back. One thing that I see a lot is I see people's thumb position be way, way off. What I mean by that is, like, let's say they're making a C major chord. If you see me make the C major chord right here, you see that my thumb is kind of comfortably wrapped around, it's almost in line with my middle finger on the second fret of the D string, right? A lot of times you'll see beginners have this, where their thumb is back because, like, they're using it as an anchor and then they're trying to, like, make a chord from there. That's pretty bad because that's gonna hurt your hand. It's gonna, like, develop fatigue earlier. Plus, it's also gonna eliminate the arch and the angle at which you're coming down, right? See, so, like, you can kind of see all my fingers are kind of coming straight down-ish there. If I have my thumb pulling back, see how that kind of cranks my entire hand back? And then it's really a lot harder for me to get good tone if I'm doing that, right? So think about your thumb positioning and how hard you're actually gripping onto that chord, and that's really gonna help open up a lot of the different things, right? So thumb positioning is huge. A lot of classical players will play with their thumb kind of on the back, and the reason for that is if you have your thumb on, like, the back of the guitar neck, like here, that's kind of like the optimal spot to come straight down. Again, I like kind of having my thumb wrapped over a little bit. A lot of players also play notes with their thumb, like a thumb over. I'm not a huge thumb over player, but again, that doesn't mean my thumb isn't there just in case. You never know when you might run into some thumb stuff. You know what I'm saying? So we got that C, G, A minor, E. And again, think of the chord voicings here. Again, there's nothing wrong with doing this C to this G, but it's just so much easier to do this C to this G. And again, focus on selectively just hitting a few strings. If it's really hard to do these 3-finger voicings like this, simplify it. Just make it a 2-finger chord voicing. C and E, G and B, C major chord-ish. I think it even sounds prettier just leaving the rest of the strings open. And then we do the E minor chord, and then use that for the A minor chord. Again, turns into a suspended chord if you do it like that. There might be different names for doing these different chord voicings, but again, it's mostly the same thing. Like, here's the full version of C, G, A minor, E. The 2-finger chord voicings. Some would say that even sounds more interesting. And again, all that stuff is just precursors for being able to change chords more effectively, all right? So it's a lot of stuff to think about when you're first starting out because there's a lot of things that can go wrong, just like these stupid things. Like, sometimes there's like a little plastic spacer that you take out that allows the nozzle. Sometimes you have to, like, twist it and it pops up. Sometimes, I don't understand. There needs to be some kind of consortium to just focus on one thing, one way to do that. Now again, with the guitar chord changing, there's a lot of ways to do it. We don't need to worry about that because a lot of them can be effective. But with that's confusing, the dispenser thing. I think I might have a disorder where I get really nervous every time I get, like, a new dispenser. Anyways, this isn't about my issues. This is about changing chords more effectively, right? So think about loosening up that death grip, leading with a root note, a bass note, going from there, and then selectively just, working on what you have and really giving yourself a deadline, keeping a nice, steady rhythm. Again, just practicing with the song even is a good way to develop timing, and then you're gonna be golden, but probably only if you use elixir strings, because that's essentially the most important tip of all. So thanks to Elixir for sponsoring the video. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions or comments, hit me in the comment section, Instagram, or the website. Sign up for my Patreon for like hundreds, literally over 100 lessons now that are ordered in sequential order. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot.